President-elect Donald Trump ran his campaign vowing retribution and going after his perceived enemies, including top military officers. Now, NBC News has learned from a U.S. official and a person familiar with the matter that the Trump transition team is weighing whether current and retired military officers involved in the chaotic U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan could be court-martialed. Officials working on the transition are looking at whether any military officer could be eligible for charges, including as serious as treason. Of course, it was then President Donald Trump who made the deal with the Taliban back in 2020 to withdraw all U.S. troops from Afghanistan. President Biden then completed the full withdrawal, though his administration underestimated just how weak the Afghan army was and how quickly the Afghan government would fall. Joining me now from the Pentagon is NBC News global security reporter Dan Luce. Thanks so much for being here, Dan. So what more do you know and do we know about the plan by the Trump transition team? And who was among those officers you think involved in the withdrawal who could be impacted by this?
You know, it is a huge question mark and just extraordinary and really unprecedented. This kind of talk, even this kind of threat is unprecedented really in U.S. politics after the Second World War. And keep in mind, as you said, that this withdrawal was something that was ordered. The military was ordered to withdraw U.S. troops from Afghanistan. And of course, the top generals recommended to President Biden to keep a small contingent there. So just on the sheer logic, it's confusing. Obviously, some of the top generals that might be in the crosshairs would be the chairman at the time, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Milley, who we all know Donald Trump is very hostile towards because he has made some critical statements once he retired. Also, the head of Central Command at the time, General McKenzie, he's publicly stated that he takes responsibility for how the withdrawal unfolded. And of course, the State Department, a lot of civilians who were in charge at the time have been heavily criticized by both sides of the aisle on how some aspects of that withdrawal was handled. And of course, legally, Yamiche, it's not clear how this would hold up, if at all. The military has its own strict code of justice, and court-martials are not something that can just be carried out like a political hearing on the Hill. It's a legal process, and there has to be evidence. And it's hard to see how that would hold up.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely hard to see, but could happen as you report. This comes, of course, all of this comes as we've reported that Trump is also expected to purge top military officers at the Pentagon, which, of course, is where you're reporting from today. So how are officials there reacting to some of these plans by the president-elect? And how could this really impact the U.S. military? What are they talking about there?
You know, for anyone who serves in uniform, and as well as the hundreds of thousands of civilians that serve around the world for the Pentagon, they take the military's politically neutral status extremely seriously. And for senior officers especially, their attitude is they follow the orders of the commander-in-chief, and they do not engage in politics. And it is completely taboo and unacceptable and actually not allowed. And so the idea that perhaps Donald Trump would follow through on this threat and his pick for Secretary of Defense has talked about wanting to fire, quote-unquote, woke generals. What exactly that means, it's not clear. But it does suggest some kind of a politically motivated purge, potentially, where perceived political inclinations are somehow brought up against particular generals or commanding officers. And one of the issues that comes up a lot, Yamiche, is this idea of diversity, and that if a general or a senior officer was trying to promote diversity in the ranks, somehow that would be grounds for firing. And of course, this has been a policy for decades. The military has sought to recruit the best people they could and to make sure the military reflected what the United States looked like. But the chairman who's coming, the current chairman, General C.Q. Brown, who's coming for a lot of criticism, he is a fighter pilot. He got that. He earned that. You cannot fake your way into that job. So this is causing a lot of consternation.
A lot of consternation, a lot of worry. Definitely something that we're going to continue to talk about. Thank you so much, Dan Luce.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.